Hey everybody, good morning and happy International Day of Happiness to you. My name is Aaron Sherinian and I represent the United Nations Foundation, and today I have the pleasure of starting off this conversation with two individuals who I know have a lot to say about this topic, a topic that people are talking about all over the world. And I want to thank everybody who's tuning in for this, people who have submitted questions, and for people who are going to be interacting with us today. We are coming to you today. I'm coming to you from New York City. Our guests are coming to you from around the world, and comments are coming to you from around the world today on a day when we're talking about one of the things that we probably should be talking about more, and our experts will be asking some of those questions and giving us some ideas about it. I am joined today by Roko Belic and Mark Williamson, and both of them are they're good people, and I've learned a lot just from prepping for this conversation and following their work. But I think today you'll hear why they are esteemed, why they are people who have done interesting and creative work on this issue, and why communities are galvanizing around them. We're going to ask them some questions. We're going to kick off in a moment. You of course know who they are, and their bios are being submitted online via Twitter and via G+ and other platforms. Roko Belic, of course, is the director of Happy. His directorial debut of GENGHIS Blues won the Sundance Audience Award and was nominated for an Academy Award. Roko, how cool is it to be able to say that? I love being able to say that. And cooler for you, I'm sure. He directed the documentary Dreams, Cinema of the Subconscious. He's teamed up with some of the biggest names, and probably more important, even just some interesting, fascinating people. And we're happy that you're here with us. Thank you, Roko, for being with us today.
Excellent. Aaron, it's great to be here.
We're also joined by the founder of Action for Happiness, Mark Williamson. And Mark is going to tell us all about what Action for Happiness is and how it helps people take practical action to improve mental well-being and to help create a caring and more happy society. Mark is the director of Action for Happiness, this movement, and the movement has members in places that are going to tell us a lot about this theory of change. His expertise in the area of happiness and well-being includes work in the workplace, community groups, families, school, and policy. And prior to the Action for Happiness, Mark has been doing some fascinating things. His range of experience includes private and nonprofit sectors, and he was previously director of innovation at the Carbon Trust. So Mark, welcome. Thanks for being here.
My pleasure. Lovely to be here.
So, since we're talking to each other on this day, this United Nations declared International Day of Happiness, let's start with the question. And I'm going to ask you, Roko, we're going to start with you. I'm going to ask the big question, maybe the one that seems potentially obvious to some, but probably not discussed enough, and that is, what is happiness in your opinion?
Yeah, well, some people think that happiness is an experience of pleasure. And that's not the happiness that I'm interested in. To me, happiness is a depth of emotional experience and resilience that enables one to experience life, whether life is happening in a good way or a bad way, whether you're experiencing challenges or things that are positive. Happiness is that state of being that enables you to experience life in an optimal way. Often it's joyful, smiling, laughing, but sometimes it's more contemplative. Happiness is that sort of that bedrock that we want to be at to live our lives in a way that is positive and that is fulfilling.
And I'd love to come back and hear more about how that definition maybe has changed through your work with the film. And I know we're going to be able to talk about the film and even how to access the film, etc. Let's next hear from Mark, because I want to unpack some of these definitions that both of you are bringing to the table. Mark, you have a bird's eye view on a community that's galvanizing around this question. What for you is the definition of happiness as we're looking at this International Day?
Well, I think it's really simple, Aaron. I think happiness is feeling good about how your life is going. So it is about a feeling, but it's, as Roko said, it's not about just a sort of momentary pleasure or a kind of short-term, perhaps hedonistic definition of positive emotion. It's something more deep and more meaningful than that. It's about this overall sense that life is not only okay and you're able to cope with what happens in your life, but also that life is meaningful and purposeful in some way. So I think that's a universal construct, happiness, that we all relate to. It's what we all want for our loved ones and indeed for ourselves. But what differs hugely between us is what actually makes us happy. So again, it'd be lovely to explore in this conversation not so much what happiness is, because I think we do all instinctively know that. It's more, what is it that creates happiness for ourselves and for others, and indeed for our society in general.
So I'm happy to hear both of you raise this idea in different ways, but talking about how there can be a sense of purpose. And I think as the Secretary General of the UN has said in preparation for this day, and as people are coming around both here in New York and around the world, there's this idea about rallying for something, and for something that is maybe bigger than ourselves, and for what that means. And it's more than just, as you've said, something for the moment. I'd love to change around even, and you never do this to guests, but hopefully it's International Day of Happiness, and they'll be benevolent to me as we change up the order of the conversation a little bit. Let's acknowledge maybe the obvious for some people who are joining our Google Plus Hangout right now. We live in a world where there's some things in the headlines, a lot of things in the headlines, and there's some realities in people's lives that will seem anything less than happy on first view, right? So how do we talk about happiness on a day like this? How do we define happiness on a day like this in a world where there are things that are serious, and where we're talking about issues related to health, to the health of children, to girls and women who aren't empowered, to the issues related to climate and the environment, things that we at the UN Foundation love to connect people with, and that's our mission to do. But how do you work on happiness, if you will? And we'll start with you, Mark, and then we'll go to you, Roko. How do you work on happiness in a world where there seems to be so much reason to not be happy, if you will? Mark, how do you must grapple with this question all the time.
Well, I do grapple with it, and but I think the answer is because these things entirely relate to happiness. In fact, if you look anywhere in the world and you look at the challenges we face, and you'd have to argue that the ultimate thing we want for society, for mankind, if you like, is for the maximum amount of well-being and for the least amount of suffering in the world. So all of these major issues you've talked about matter insofar as they completely destroy human happiness, whether that's poverty, whether that's the risk to future happiness from climate change, whether that's the challenges around empowerment or gender inequality. These are all things that shatter human happiness. So happiness is much deeper and more profound than just talking about the smiley, sort of slightly privileged middle class view of a luxurious life. That isn't the real happiness we're talking about. This is the fundamental question of what makes for a good life, and that's as relevant in a disadvantaged, remote, poverty-stricken African community as it is in a stressful office environment in New York or London. We're all grappling with wanting to experience the fullest, happiest, and most a successful life, and these challenges you've highlighted are hugely real, and so the art of happiness in a happier world is about grappling with the gritty reality of the human experience and saying, look, how can we take a positive approach to solving these problems?
Thank you. Roko, over to you. You're courageous as a filmmaker and a storyteller, so we look to you for a courageous approach to this really big question. How do you do it?
Well, this is actually one of the most exciting things of my experience making the film, is discovering the relationship, as Mark was mentioning, between our own happiness and the problems that we see in the world. So some people have said to me, isn't happiness selfish when so many people out there are suffering and need help? And in fact, the research that I came across that's so inspiring to me is that happy people literally make the world a better place. Happy people are more likely to help a stranger in need. They're more likely to come up with a creative solution to a problem. Happy people are less likely to want to go to war. They're less likely to pollute the environment. So all of these things, when I read the newspaper, all these things that I wish I could change are actually being changed positively by improving and increasing happiness in the world. So it's a direct correlation, as Mark said, and I love the fact that the research is pointing us in such an inspiring and hopeful way.
So this taking that research point and taking, I think, your explanation, I'd love to get to this question: if happier people don't retreat, if happier people are the people who engage and who have this broader definition that you're challenging us with. And by the way, I just want to acknowledge how cool this conversation is, and how I'm grateful for how frank and honest you're being with these big questions. Let's go to the question about how do people engage? I mean, how do we manifest happiness in our everyday life in the micro, and how do we manifest happiness in the larger, in the macro? And I look to you. I'd like to start with you, Mark, because this, for what I understand about everything that you're doing in this exciting community that's galvanizing, This is definitely your daily bread. So I'd like to start with you with some ideas about how you can manifest that happiness and not retreat and engage.
Well, thank you. And I think probably to answer that, I'll start by just saying a tiny bit about Action for Happiness, this movement that I have the privilege to be sort of helping to lead. The vision here is that, of course, we need systems to change and many things in the world around us to change if we want a happier society. But it's actually that this ability to change the world starts with each of us. So Action for Happiness is building this huge community of people that not only think that happiness matters, both to ourselves and collectively, but that we can do something about it. This word action is really, really important. So when people join the Action for Happiness movement, and we now have over 300,000 sort of supporters in 160 countries, when they join, they make a personal pledge that says, I will try to create more happiness and less unhappiness in the world around. Very simple, but actually quite profound if you follow that through. And that sort of has implications, for you personally, how you approach your own well-being, how you perhaps, behave in your family, with your friends, but also in your community, in your workplace. We have teachers taking these ideas into school classrooms. We have business leaders trying to transform the culture in their organizations. And of course, this also goes for, the politicians that you vote for, the issues that you campaign on. So we believe that you can actually, in every aspect of your life, take action to both improve your own happiness and also help others. So then to give you some real examples, so one of the frameworks we've developed in our work is called the 10 Keys to Happier Living, very much based on the same sort of research that Roko, did a brilliant job of highlighting in the Happy film that we're great fans of. That emerging science from positive psychology, from neuroscience, from behavioral science is showing us not a 10 commandments for happiness, because we're all uniquely different, but there are a series of themes that consistently come up that really make a difference. So let me just share a few of those with you. One is, when we do things for others, it makes us happier too. Already hinted at by Roko and other comments, but doing good feels good. When we care for others, actually there's this dual benefit. It helps others, but it also helps us too. Second action, our relationships are the most vital thing for our happiness and well-being. So if we want to be happier, we should spend less time focusing on things and financial accumulation and focus more on our connections to others and our relationships. And there are many more like this, but we're finding you can empower people and inspire them to take action that really makes a difference for them and spread these ripples of connection and positivity in their communities as well.
And Mark, can I just mention one thing? The reason why what we're hearing is so interesting from you and so exciting is that it works both ways. Right? If you want to make yourself happy, you do something for somebody else. And if you want to make somebody else happy, you do something for somebody else, right? It's like you want to make the world a better place, you help the world. If you want to make yourself happier, you help the world. It's the same answer for two seemingly opposing questions. And that's sort of the beauty of the research that I've come across in making the film. I spent 6 years talking to leading experts in the field and traveling around the world. We shot in about 14 countries, and everywhere these consistencies are showing up. That and really, it's the fundamental key of what you're saying, Mark. That when we help somebody else, we're helping ourselves. That simple thing that I never really thought about, although we hear it from the wisdom, right? It comes from different religious practices. It comes from our grandmothers and our parents, but I didn't give it the weight that I give it now when a scientist tells me and he shows me what's happening in the brain when you're participating in helping somebody or being cooperating with somebody. So this is all very, very exciting stuff, and it's fairly recent that we know this. It's not a coincidence that International Day of Happiness is happening now, that it didn't happen 50 years ago, because 50 years ago this data just
Roko, I think we may have lost the last part of that comment, but I want to build on it, and I'd like. Yeah, we hear you now. Thank you. I want to build on your comment, and I'd like to ask a question to both of you. You're both storytellers, so I know you're up for this. I'd like you to tell me a story. I'd like each of you to give me an example of someone who has taken this approach and is manifesting it in her or his daily life. Someone who's made the choice to not retreat and to engage and to look out of herself or out of himself and to engage in happiness. And I know each of you has has many examples. I think, Mark, you probably have thousands of examples in this community.
Yeah.
So I think you have amazing, intimate stories. Let's start with you, Mark.
Well, thank you. It's a lovely question, and you're right. The human story matters much more than the research papers in many ways in terms of changing people's connection, because we all connect with the personal stories. So we have something called the Action for Happiness course, which is an 8-week community course that we run, and our members sort of on a voluntary basis run in different communities. So the story I was going to tell you is of a lady called Jasmine who came to one of our courses. She had been struggling with chronic pain for many years. She had just an unbelievable array of problems with her physical health, and as a result, she was really depressed. And she said to us, "This is my life. I have kind of no life. I'm really struggling." She came across Action for Happiness, and she came across some of these ideas that Roko and I have been mentioning, that we can do things to be happier, and that actually it's to do with our connections with others. And so during this course, she discovered mindfulness, one of these themes that comes up again and again in the wellbeing research. She learnt through that actually to be a bit more at peace with her own pain. It didn't make the pain go away, but actually she found she could cope better, and she became happier as a result. But it didn't stop there, and why I love this story is that Jasmine, later on in the course, when we were talking about our purpose in life, she realized that she had been feeling sort of deeply unpurposeful in her life for many years, and in fact discovered that what she wanted to do was to help other people who were struggling like her with chronic pain. So as a direct result of starting this conversation, not only did she change her own well-being quite profoundly, she now works to try and help other people who are dealing with chronic pain issues, and she's become a kind of beacon of hope for them. She's sharing these positive psychology ideas with them. She's doing a wonderful job of spreading the message behind Action for Happiness. So, in that story, you've got just this personal change, but also this journey towards wanting to help others and discovering the real lasting happiness that comes with that.
Great. Now, you said her name was Jasmine. Is that right, Mark?
That's right. Yeah.
Cool. That story about Jasmine is very powerful. Roko, if you're with us, we're gonna. Don't think we've got Roko with us yet. We're gonna still try to see if we can get him back in. Roko, can you hear us now? Not yet, it looks like. So then we're gonna move ahead with the dialogue, and hopefully we're gonna get Roko back soon. I'd like to, with your permission, Mark, I'd like to tell a story about someone who is. Maybe someone that you would not describe as an everyday person, because he's definitely a celebrity. But I got to tell you, here in New York today on the International Day of Happiness, and you're seeing that hashtag Happy Day trend, I think, in New York City and along a number of social platforms around the world. But Pharrell Williams has taken this idea about happiness and is asking people to take action. And we at the UN Foundation are pleased to see that the United Nations and groups like Live Earth and Pharrell Williams, through his international hit, the song Happy, are asking people to do precisely what you're talking about, make some changes in their life. I think Jasmine's story is a powerful story about something that it has to be internal and also external. I think that Pharrell is asking us to take actions about the big issues in the world right now and some of the big things that the world is grappling with, including the world's to-do list, the big goals that the world is grappling with, that the UN is trying to lead us on.
Well, I love the fact that obviously, within this spectrum of people supporting the day, we've got stories of individuals in quite a disadvantaged, challenging community, through to massively globally well-known superstars who are aligning themselves with this issue. And also, I love the fact that Pharrell and the UN Foundation are connecting this personal happiness story with these global issues, and especially the happy planet and the focus on climate change. That is the biggest challenge, of course, to our long-term happiness. So I think that's fabulous. I'd also just like to say that I think everyone who works in this area, owes Pharrell a huge debt of gratitude for writing a song about happiness that's actually really cool and doesn't create some of the adverse reactions that I've just done about 15 radio interviews with the BBC in various different places this morning as part of International Day of Happiness. And whereas in years gone by you would have some pretty awful musical introductions to that sequence, almost universally now you're getting a bit of Pharrell and you're thinking, actually, this is a little bit cooler than it used to be.
So, he has really changed, right? He's changed the way that we're introing and moving and thinking about it. We've got Roko back, so I want to ask him this question about the story. I'd love for you to tell us, we heard about Jasmine. I told the story about Pharrell. we'd like you to tell us a story, Roko, about the people that you, again, as a storyteller, someone that you've met that has done this, and then I'd love to take what I hear as an emerging theme into our final segment here, and we have a number of people who are commenting online so that we can respond to them as well. So, Roko, tell us that story about someone who's taken this understanding of happiness and who's made a change for the better in their and our world.
I met a woman named Janice Bell in California, in the San Francisco Bay Area, and what she did was she was a nurse a long time ago. She was a nurse, and she wasn't sure what kind of nurse she wanted to be. And one day her boss asked her if she would be open to being a hospice nurse. And she immediately kind of shrieked back. She thought, hospice, that's dealing with people who are dying, who have terminal illnesses and no hope for a cure. But she went to check it out. She said, well, maybe, you know, if my boss is asking me, maybe they need me. And she had a wonderful experience that first day. Cut to 30 years later, she's had hundreds of patients, and every day she said she is so ecstatic to go to work because she feels this overwhelming sense of fulfillment and purpose in her life. And I thought, again, but when she was telling me this, I thought, well, this is still a serious thing. So I followed her around to see what it was actually like. And all day, she and her patients are laughing, they're telling stories, they're having fun. Now, these are people on their deathbeds. And some of these patients died during the time that I was following Janice through her work days. And that seems like something that would be very depressing for us, but actually the counterintuitive truth is that when you engage people, even at difficult times, if you do it in a way that, again, gives yourself a sense of purpose where you're actually helping other people, they feel that and they can reciprocate, it can be a win-win for everybody. And so she was somebody that is, you know, my experience of meeting Janice has stayed with me ever since then, and she continues to inspire me.
Aaron, could I just follow on from that, because I love that story, and I think that one of the things that's so powerful about, I mean, the film that Roko made is this fact that although it's all about happiness, it touches on some of the most challenging and difficult issues around death and some of the things you wouldn't associate with happiness. And there's this very strong emerging body of research about what they call post-traumatic growth, that often it's the most awful situations that none of us would ever choose for any of us, ourselves or our loved ones, that lead to some kind of amazing transformation in us. And I think there's a really important reason for this, which is it's sometimes only when we're facing our own mortality or a serious issue that we really question what matters. And I think today, the International Day of Happiness and this celebration and focus on happiness is really about saying what actually matters most. You know, it's not actually the salary we earn or the big house or the flashy car or the fame and celebrity even. It's about these, you know, as Roko was saying, this sense of purpose, these connections, these actually little moments. I always love this quote that says, enjoy the little things because one day you may look back and realize they were the big things. And I think there's something really profound in that. And, you know, so let's hope today is encouraging lots of people to reflect on what really matters to them.
And I think that in this idea about the little things and the big things being connected, whether it's Janice or Jasmine or Pharrell or some of the stories we've told today, in fact, I would love to put those three people in a room together. Maybe we are right there, and the two of you, which I think that's what's really the remarkable thing about living in this era is that we're all connecting right now. We're utilizing tech and the social media era to really connect around this. But one thing that I was listening for it, and gents, in the social stream and in learning about you and in listening to you today, you have not talked about stuff that makes us happy. You've not used the phrase stuff that makes us happy. You've talked about ways that people can have happiness, that they can cause happiness, that they can connect and have purpose. You talked about some of the biggest challenges in our world, and I'd love it if Mark, given the fact that you know that Pharrell and the UN are focused on climate today, I know that you have a background in this and a passion for it. Is that are there little things that we're maybe ignoring that we could look back on and find are big things? I'd love to ask you this climate question in that context and to get your perspective on it. And then I want to make sure we get to some of the good questions that are coming in. But it dawns on me that there's got to be something that we can do as well, and I'd love to hear your perspective on it.
Well, I was in a session with some leading academics recently talking about well-being and happiness, and one of them said, I think the happiness research is the best thing that's ever happened to the environmental movement, which really struck a chord with me, and I'll tell you why. So before doing what I do now, I worked in sustainability and climate change, as you mentioned, for this organization called the Carbon Trust. So I was really passionate, and I still am, about what can we do to solve our big planetary issues. But what I was finding in that space is the basic narrative is we're all a bit screwed, the planet's doomed, and we basically need to change our lives and fly less and do less and turn things off because future generations will thank us for it. And the basic reaction that triggers is people putting their hands over their ears and saying, I'm just going to carry on as normal, I can't hear you. But I discovered in my own personal life, and indeed, of course, all of us in this conversation know this, that the good life doesn't need to cost the earth. And in fact, we can't really ever get away from our planetary problems if we have this idea of success being linked to perpetual economic growth. If it's always about consuming more and earning more and having more, we basically are going to be making a very unhappy planet and ruining the future of our civilization. So for me, I discovered that the ultimate solution, I think, to our planetary challenges is to change that narrative towards the good life being about, being happy, not having as much as possible. And actually, when you live a happier life, you're more likely to look, as Roko said, look out for these big issues, but you're also less likely to be obsessed with consuming and using energy and kind of wasting resources and so on. So I think happiness and sustainability, this tiny micro-personal issue of feeling and this massive global issue of sustainability are completely intertwined. And when we discover more authentic happiness, we also become more likely to be good servants of the environment.
Well said. The idea that we're stewards of a place that's not just about us, that's about us as individuals, it's about all of us. Well said.
Exactly.
Roko, I'd like to turn the dialogue to you, and I'm going to ask you to do two things at the same time. I'd love your perspective on this question about how the individual is connected to the big issues of our time. Again, poverty, hunger. These are big issues. Climate change, the things that people are talking about today at the UN and on the hashtag Happy Planet. We're seeing all of these issues discussed, especially as it relates to climate action. But I also want to acknowledge that we have some people who are posting at us from New Orleans and around the world asking the questions about what moved you. They're really curious about what moved you to get into this. So if you could answer those two at the same time.
Sure. The first question I think can be answered by something that my producing partner, his name is Eiji Shimizu, that he figured out the most succinct way to say it, which is in all of the research we did, in all the countries we went to, all the scientists we spoke with, what we discovered is that there is no such thing as a selfish, happy person. That's amazing, isn't it? What that means is people who engage, people who care about other people, people who don't just put themselves at the center of their lives, who feel that they can reach out to do something for other people, those are the people who are happy. And those are the people, obviously, who will help solve problems for others. So it's completely related. All the problems we want to solve when we look in the newspaper, all of these things, as I mentioned, poverty, climate change, environmental degradation, crime, so many things that we wish we could affect, we will be affecting if we increase happiness. So it's like the tail wagging the dog. It actually works in this case. In terms of what moved me, it relates very much to what Mark was just talking about, which is I got a phone call from a good friend of mine. His name is Tom Shadyac. And Tom is a very, very successful Hollywood filmmaker. He's made tens of millions of dollars making blockbuster comedies. The Nutty Professor, Bruce Almighty, Liar, Liar, Ace Ventura, Pet Detective was his first movie. He called me one day, and this is at the beginning when the research was just starting to come out into the mainstream. And he said, look, there's an article in the newspaper that says we as Americans, we're a rich country, but we're not a very happy country compared to the rest of the world. I get it. And he didn't quite say it like this, but what he essentially said in the next 2 minutes was, ever since I've been living in this huge mansion, I have noticed that the people who clean my house and mow my lawn are happier than me and many of my friends who are my friends in Hollywood who make even more money than me, who are beautiful and talented. What's going on? The people who clean my house are happier than those of us who've reached the extreme sort of grotesque version of the American dream, having as much money as we do. I know what doesn't work to make us happy because we've achieved those things and that doesn't work. I want to know what does. So would you be interested to make a documentary film about it? And that's the genesis. I immediately said yes. It sounded fascinating, and that was my introduction to this whole world.
You know, I think that anybody that's been listening, and maybe some people didn't know about the movie before, I've asked my team that works with me at the UN Foundation to make sure that people are seeing the trailer and that it's being passed around. And you're generous with this idea and your storytelling. I'm glad you raised it, because the movie has a lot to, I think, teach a lot of us. Also, Mark, as you talked about Action for Happiness, as I've visited the web properties and followed it on social, it got me excited to see the ranks of people that are so proud to say they're part of it. It's a diverse community, super interesting. At certain points, totally, counterintuitive maybe in a lot of ways to see all these people coming together. But that's the great part of it. As we come to a close in this session here, I want to encourage everyone who's been listening to learn more about Roko and his work. Again, Roko Belic and his work, director of Happy the movie, that has so much interesting storytelling in it, and then Mark Williamson, the founder of Action for Happiness, and this movement that's galvanized people to take action, to take action in their lives, and in so doing help impact the world. We want to thank everyone who as part of the stream is talking on the hashtag Happy Planet, who's taking action for climate. I want to thank Jasmine and Janice, the people we heard about today, the thousands and millions of people like them. I want to thank the people like Pharrell, and those who have even uploaded. I just got a message as we're talking here today that people now from 7 continents have uploaded pictures of themselves celebrating happiness today while acknowledging a very serious problem. 7 continents. I don't know who was in Antarctica doing that. I want to go find out. I want to go look at globalhappyparty.com right now and find out how that works. But I think that connection of people celebrating happiness, taking action, is really remarkable. I want to thank our guests. Thank you for your commitment. Thank you for your honesty. And I'm going to say on behalf of everyone, we look forward to following what emerges in this conversation on this very important day, the International Day of Happiness. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Roko.
Thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure to be here. Have a great day.
Thank you.